Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmidty, Swanny and Clarky visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Not too bad. How are you, Schmidty?
I'm all right. It's for our listeners. It's just Swanny and I today, which is the first time I think we've ever.
It is. I've never been in like just the duet. I've only ever been in the triplet,
trio,
the threesome, the trio.
Yeah, the threesome.
I shouldn't have said that. I don't know where that came from. How inappropriate.
Right. Yes, Clarky can't join us today, so Swanny and I are going to crack on nonetheless.
Absolutely.
And so, any news?
Any news? Not really. I've got a son who got his driver's license on the weekend, so that should change our lives a little bit. Already it has. We were able to. We had our Uber driver on. He got the license, I think, his test was at 4, so let's say he was home by 5 o'clock, and his first shift with us was he had to drop us off at 7 o'clock to a dinner.
Desi, already designated driver.
Yes.
Excellent.
It was funny. My husband was sending a note to his sister who's travelling before, and I thought it's so apt. They were saying, he had got his license, whatever else. And he said, how wonderful. He's like, yes, very nice. I have a butler, a chauffeur, and a bodyguard, but none of them will help me. And it's so true. We've got the little butler who's the one who does all the stuff around the house, very helpful. One who's like the brawn, who would be the bodyguard. And now we've got the driver. But, no one wants to do anything for anybody but themselves. So it's kind of lost on us. But anyway, hopefully we'll make that work. What about you, darling? What's news with you?
Not a great deal of news. I spent the weekend helping my sister. She's needs to sell her house. They bought a nice house in Woodend and she's got to sell the old house. So a lot of working bees on gardening and cleaning. So that was bad.
Is that still in Melbourne?
Yep, it's up in Roxby Park, which is a northern suburb.
Okay.
It's all right. You don't need to know where it is.
That's right. I just was wondering if it's still in Melbourne. Yep.
Yeah, no, it is. I suppose we should introduce ourselves. I'm Schmidty.
I'm Swanny. And there is no Clarky.
There's no Clarky today.
No.
And so together we are.
We are Trial
by
Wine.
And what are you drinking?
Not wine, of course, because I never do. I've got a bottle of soda water.
Top shelf, though.
Top shelf. We've got Schweppes today, a bit of Schweppescence. What about you, my love?
I've got something sort of similar. I've got a soda stream with the delicious, what do they call it, a sun-kissed zero sugar syrup in it and a touch of vodka. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you've done that.
Mm-hmm. I've got a lot of work on at the moment in my professional life. Yes. I know, hard for our listeners to believe that we don't do this full time and it's not paying our mortgage, but it's not. And so I have a day job and that's been really full on at the moment. So I do thank my partners in crime, being you and Clarky, for picking up on some of the storytelling weight for me at the moment because I don't even have time to – I've got just about enough time to edit shows and stay a week ahead, but at the moment I haven't got time to write too much. So
fair enough.
I
do a lot of the heavy lifting all the time. It's a pleasure, darling, to help you out.
So I suppose on that note, you have a story for me.
I do have a story.
What is it?
I fear that I may have sort of spent more time, as I often do, on the bits that interest me, not so much the bits that don't interest me. But I found it really interesting. And the sources are ABC News, The Sun, Daily Mail, FBI.gov, Britannica.com.
Highbrow, Britannica.
And for once, I didn't watch any. Actually, I did listen to something. But I need to just check what it's called because that's important.
It's not the Smithsonian, but it's Britannica.
No. And then I listened to I guess it was an interview on something on YouTube called Letters and Politics, which sounds very highbrow for me, but trust me, I can bring it down. Don't worry, people. That's not why I'd be interested in it. Fear not. But yeah, I listened to that. And then there are a whole host of things that you could watch. A lot of them, I believe, are probably, made for TV and whatever else. And I haven't done any of those. None of them are terribly recent anyway, and not readily available here. But, I mean, if you want to find them and you've got the time to do it, it would not be difficult, I don't think. Okay, so geography. Where are we going to start? So this crime occurs in the state of California. So I'm back in the US again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in an area that I've actually been to, or sort of it's set in an area that I've been to. So some years ago, I've been to San Francisco separately, but we went to San Francisco and then we went beyond there to what is essentially Silicon Valley. And what we did was we went and stayed with some friends who work in Silicon Valley. And it's interesting because whilst it's been called that for a very long time, it was a group of suburbs and things that sat outside San Francisco before it ever became known as that. So I think the parts of the story that sort of features it's called the Bay Area. So basically anything that's around the Bay of San Francisco, it can go above it, below it, around it, the whole bit. So that's kind of where this story's set. And as I was sort of saying, I've been to some of the places, there was some schools that are involved that were in a place called Atherton, and we actually stayed there. And then I think a lot of people also know Monterey, which is much further down, but it's down the coast. Menlo, which is where Facebook is, I think. Certainly where we stayed when we visited Facebook. So it's all sort of places that I've sort of dipped in and out of and had a little bit of experience. So I've got something in my mind. And also the University of California, the Berkeley campus.
Okay.
Now, the crime's set in the 1970s. Now, the best way I could describe it is America was sort of gripped by a strange fever at this time. It's sort of being described as sort of the last remnants of, the free-loving hippies and the movement kind of, I love this word, metastasizing into something a bit more sinister. And when I really start to think about it, there are quite a few crimes and different things that spring to mind when we think of the 70s, and certainly California. I think that they might not all spring to mind, but as you start to think about different things that happened, it's like, actually, there was some stuff going down.
Some weird shit happening.
There was. Absolutely. And what they were finding was that the free-loving hippie movement was metastasizing into underground domestic terrorist groups, and they were rising up. Yeah. The FBI estimates that over 18 months from 1971, this is early years here, there were 2,500 bombings on American soil, almost 5 a day. And that's not from external influences, that's from stuff that's going on internally. You'll love this. The West Coast seemed to be crawling with serial killers. The Zodiac
ever.
Yeah. The Zodiac killer had mysteriously vanished, but Ted Bundy and the Golden State Killer had just begun campaigns of terror that would last years. The Watergate scandal was in full swing. The Vietnam war was coming to an end, and an oil embargo had just triggered an energy crisis. Amid the chaos and violence, it felt like the nation had lost its collective mind, like anything could happen next. And I love
it's a bit like now. Yeah.
It is a lot like now when everything feels so tumultuous and every day it's a new soundbite, it's a new piece of news, and it's so chaotic. It feels so crazy that nothing is particularly surprising anymore. It's always a surprise. It's like ridiculous.
It's funny you say that because I was reading, so for our listeners, we're recording this just a couple of days after Donald Trump berated President Zelensky.
Yeah.
And he walked out, not then organising whatever deal he was there to organise about something else, minerals or something.
Rare minerals.
Yeah.
Rare minerals.
And I was reading something about it, and people were sort of talking about how almost the incredible behaviour of Trump has got to a point where people they don't even notice it anymore.
No,
it's like they just sort of shrug it. It's like, oh, yeah. Like, go back away from Trump, right, and go multiple presidencies previous. If someone had come along and just been, frankly, the criminal that he is, and then had behaved in a sort of way, I just wonder how people would respond, because it would have been a real shock at that point. But it's almost like he's, over the 4 years of his term, then the following 4 years of carry on, and now he's back in. So it's just like chipped away at the society, so they just don't even respond to it anymore. It's just like, oh, yeah, it's a Trumpism. It's like, it's not.
Totally.
It's treason almost. Anyway.
I definitely felt that during, certainly his initial election campaign and then during his initial presidency. I kept thinking that something would change, like he would get called out.
Something's got to give,
but it just simply seems to get more and more and goes on, and then being re-elected. And it's
madder and madder, isn't it?
It is, and I don't know where it's headed, but it doesn't feel good.
Frightening is where it's headed.
Doesn't feel good.
When he decided to introduce the words World War III in his rant, I was like, oh my God, what are you lining up here?
It's not nice.
It's terrifying. Anyway, enough about that.
Yes.
Person.
Anyway, so I guess the point was, in the early 70s, things were changing. And, it's silly things, like if you think back to Forrest Gump, the movie, the shift in where that movie starts and how it becomes very dark in the 70s. It goes from being... It is.
The impact of veterans coming back.
Yes.
And a pointless war that they didn't win.
Young people were angry
Afghanistan.
and, weird. Yes. So basically there was a shift for the American public, and I guess more so in California, where it's like they sort of say this is when the Americans started to lock their doors at night, where there's that move away from innocence into a place where things are shifting dramatically. So that's just to set the scene. So we're in California in the sort of early to mid-70s. And this crime actually occurs in 1974. So it was the 50th year anniversary last year of this crime. So who are we dealing with? Well, I'm going to introduce you to a family which I suspect you may already have heard of, the Hearst family. And I want to draw particular attention to their daughter, a girl by the name of Patricia, who went by the name of Patty. So you possibly know Patty Hearst. I'm sure you've heard of it. Yeah. So Hearst, who now prefers to go by the name of Patricia, was born in February 1954 in San Francisco, California. And she was the third of 5 daughters of Randolph Apperson Hearst and Catherine Wood Campbell. So she was raised primarily in Hillsborough, attended a private school called Crystal Springs School for Girls, and then Sacred Heart in Atherton, which is where I said I'd been, and the Santa Catalina School in Monterey, which again is further down the coast, but I suspect it was a boarding school. She attended Menlo College, which I had a little bit of a look at, and it's basically just a private university before she transferred to University of California, Berkeley, which is very famous and certainly very well known for having a very active political and activist. It still does. It always has. It's always, it's in every bloody movie. It's always, they're always marching there and angry and got pickets, whatever else. It's just, without knowing a great deal about Berkeley and being Australian, you go, oh, that's the one that's always in the movie.
Carrying on.
Yes, absolutely. So the connection to the family that a lot of people know is obviously William Randolph Hearst, and that is Patricia's grandfather. So he was the largest newspaper, magazine, newsreel and film business, had the film business in the world. And for anyone who's ever done the Highway 1, you can still go to Hearst Castle, which I think is a place called San Simeon. I went there probably 20 years ago. So it is this incredible
I bet it's not as good as Cryle Castle, though.
Where's that?
It's just out of Ballarat in Victoria.
I think you guys have talked about it before. Bloody Victorians, weirdos.
It's brilliant. Some person decided, I don't know, not that long ago, 30, 40 years ago, to build a fake castle, and you can go and do jousting and all sorts of things there. Anyway, so Hearst Castle sounds okay, but can you go
Hearst Castle is just an incredible
stately
home.
It's
like a mansion up on a hill that looks out of a block. It looks incredible.
Yeah, but can you do jousting?
I don't think they offered that, but I'd have to go back into my memories.
I'm
probably not. Yeah, I know.
Disappointing. You can't call it a castle if you can't joust in it.
There are connections with Hollywood as well. I've never actually seen it, so I'm embarrassed to say, but there's something to do with, I think the movie Citizen Kane is actually based on Randolph Hearst.
Yeah.
And then I think he also features in movies. Where's the one where Kate Blanchett's in it as, God, who was the very cool, very masculine, she wears suits and pants, actress?
Tilda Swinton?
No, of that era. Was it Catherine Hepburn? No, it must have been before that.
Catherine Hepburn did wear trousers.
Did Kate Blanchett ever play her in a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? And is it called maybe it was The Aviator or something like that. There's one movie.
That's Amelia Earhart, isn't it?
Yes, but no. Yeah, you're right. Amelia Earhart is. But there's some movie, maybe, what's her name? Kate Blanchett. I feel like I might be getting all my...
You might be getting all of your, what do you call
movies mixed up.
Your pop culture. No, she did. She was in The Aviator as Catherine Hepburn. Yeah.
And I feel like he was in that, or maybe it's of that era if it's not.
Never have cast her in that role.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so that's the sort of the feel of the her grandparents, from immense wealth.
Yeah.
And with that, at that time, certainly, and given that they were in the media, their family wielded immense political influence as well. So having said that, Patricia, Patty's father, was one of a number of heirs. So he didn't actually have control of any of the Hearst interests. He was just an heir. And what William Randolph Hearst had done was he had a will, obviously, that looked after an estate that looked after everybody, but they weren't looking after the money themselves. I think they were just given certain amounts. They didn't have access to it. It was managed. They just benefited from that. And certainly by name, they were able to benefit from it. What do we know about Patty? So we know that at the time that I'm talking about, she is a 19-year-old. She is a blonde, beautiful young woman who has gone through some sort of quite major changes in her life. Rather worryingly, but it wasn't deemed that bad at the time, she'd met her boyfriend when she was at school, and he was one of the teachers, so significantly older. I think she was 16, he was in his 20s.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were going to say like 40s. Okay.
No, but like,
but still,
but she was a 16-year-old student. Yeah, she was a
16.
student.
Yeah.
Anyway, the relationship continued on, and they actually had become engaged. The parents were sort of really against it to start with, but they sort of had come around, I think, and they had actually published the announcement for Patty's engagement in one of their in the San Francisco Chronicle. So that's where we're at. She has described herself as growing up sublimely self-confident in an affluent and sheltered environment, which is very easy, I think, if you really think about being super self-confident and you've not really had any challenges. She said, her childhood, I think there was some degree of, not necessarily normality to it, but they were very wealthy but not flashy. So she said, she grew up with big green lawns, horses, pools. They did go to country clubs. She did go to private school. So, yes, they were old money versus anything particularly flashy. Do you know what I mean? So they didn't have any particular...
classy with it.
Yeah, they had no security. They had never sort of really considered themselves being at any sort of risk because they just sort of went along in life with, what their friends were probably doing as well. They weren't more or less than anybody else. They just happened to be Hearsts. So,
unlike what was the one, the Society Killers, where the guy killed his mother?
Yes. No, I like to...
He was raised with very... Let's face it, I know he had a small IQ, but, how much real challenge was in his life. He didn't seem to appreciate the upbringing he had.
That's right. So despite sort of being born into what it would be immense privilege, her life didn't look terribly privileged at this particular moment. So she's 19 years old. She's recently been engaged to her fiancé, Stephen Wood. No, not Wood, Weed. Can you believe that his name's Weed? Poor thing. Stephen Weed. And she's moved from Menlo College to UC Berkeley, and they've taken a small apartment nearby. And it's, she's a sophomore at college and her whole life is ahead of her.
Quite well set up,
obviously lucky.
But she's going to college. She's just a young woman.
Yeah. And, the fiancé was a teacher. It doesn't say that he wasn't going to go and study and do other things as well, but there was nothing particularly grandiose about her life at that point. No, they were students essentially, and probably very excited to be at Berkeley and
probably enjoying that life too. It's a bit of a change.
Yes, I would think so. So that's introducing. Now we've got a scene, we've got a sort of an era, so 50 years ago, and we've got Patty Hearst. So Patty Hearst and her, frankly, very nice life. As it turns out, luck was about to run out. So on the night of February the 4th, 1974, so she was 19, she was nearly 20 because she was born, I think her birthday was the 20th Feb. Yep, nearly 20. Her luck runs out. So she and Steve are in their apartment in Berkeley. I can't call it Barclay. I don't know how to do that.
Berkeley Square. That's right.
That's right, because it's the English one. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. They're inside watching TV, and there is a knock at the front door, and they're greeted by a young, nice-looking woman, and she's saying, she's having problems with her car. Could she please use the phone?
No.
What Patty Hearst has no idea at the time is that she has been being stalked by a domestic terrorist group. So Angela Atwood is the girl's name. Angela Atwood goes into the apartment, and sure enough, two other men, armed men,
barrel in behind
her. Yep. They bash Steve quite significantly. Yep. And then they chain, gag and blindfold Patty and bundle her into the boot of a car they have waiting.
How terrifying.
And off she goes.
Go.
The FBI have described the investigation as one of the most massive agent-intensive, weird way to say it, massive agent-intensive searches in its history to find Hearst. So
they sent lots of people out to find her.
They had lots of agents trying to work out where she was. So who took her? Well, it didn't take long to find out because the people who took her were very happy to say, we've got her. We've got her. We take responsibility. So
that's worse. That's worse than just saying we want a ransom or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, we take responsibility. That's the terrorism line, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the SLA stands for the Symbionese Liberation Army. Now, when I was looking at this story at first, and I was like, Symbionese, where's that? I was like, I was just like, nothing was really coming to mind. I didn't absolutely have any idea really of what it was going to be. So let me tell you, because if you're anything like me, I was utterly clueless. And maybe if we had been at that time, we might have been more cluey. But this doesn't kind of factor into my life, as such. If we were at college campuses and we're used to hearing people protesting and about this kind of stuff, well, maybe the word Symbionese may have meant something to me, but I was thinking literally, where does that come from?
What country? They must have changed their name, that country.
And that's what I was thinking. I'm so embarrassed.
Is that like Burma?
That's funny. And I was like, I wonder where they're from.
Is that it?
Where are they from? Why are they in the US and why are they so angry? Let me tell you, the Symbionese Liberation Army was a small radical left-wing group active in the United States during the early 70s. The group is best known for its violent activities, including bank robberies, murders, and bombings. But most notably for the 1974 kidnapping of Patty Hearst, the granddaughter of publishing magnate William Randolph Hearst. So the SLA was founded in 1973, so it was pretty new, right? We're talking 1974. By a gentleman called, I think this is his real name because he changes his name to something else, Donald DeFreeze, which sounds like he should be in The Impossible. Oh, sorry, what are the ones that stretch? The Incredibles. I think there's like a Mr. Freeze there or something, like one of those cartoons. Donald DeFreeze. Donald DeFreeze was not a nice guy. He was a prison escapee. And along with a group of radical, mostly white, that's very interesting, mostly white middle-class college students, they set
nothing better to do with their time.
The Symbionese Liberation Army. They believed in revolutionary leftist ideals, combining elements of Marxism, black liberation, and anti-capitalism. Here we go. The name Symbionese was coined by the group, symbolising their desire for symbiosis,
yeah.
Or a cooperative society in which all oppressed groups would unite to overthrow capitalism and the government.
I can think of some other people who thought they could do that too, and you covered that one, Jonestown.
Yes, that comes up at the end of this story.
Right, okay, right.
It's exactly the same time.
Right.
And that's why I think when it was all going through my head, I was like, why does I wouldn't be surprised if it was mentioned or something, because I kept thinking, my mind was going out, yeah, but I was like, why is there some connection? But anyway, I didn't make the connection, but I'll get to it at the end. This group sought to incite violent revolution to address systematic inequalities, particularly racial and economic injustices. The SLA's combination of radical politics, violence, and the sensational nature of Patty Hearst's case brought them significant media attention. And it actually has made them a bit of a symbol of 1970s counterculture extremism in the US. So certainly if we had grown up there, I'm sure your parents would have been aware of them. They were very high profile, given this case would have been
massive.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the details of it, but
exactly.
And
that was like when I studied, I was like, I knew that Patty Hearst had been kidnapped, but beyond that, I didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, I was born when it happened. Well, I wasn't even born when it happened because it happened in February. So
yeah,
that's how it's lived in the modern psyche. I think this one.
So DeFreeze, is, I don't know, to me, and they say that they sort of base themselves also on Black Panther, but he has that look. He's got the short sort of afro, really cool dude kind of thing. So he was described as being a really charismatic figure, also a charismatic fugitive, and he had busted out of prison in 1973. And he changed his name to General Field Marshal. Now, I would say Chink, but I don't know how he pronounced it. CINQUE, like it's in Cinqueterra. So General Field Marshal Cinque. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's Spanish.
Cinque.
I don't know what nationality he's going, what language he's going for. Anyway, so his little band of, like terrorists, they wanted to be militant like the Black Panthers, and another group which I've never heard of called the Weather Underground. Yeah. In reality,
Weather Underground, I don't think that's much Weather Underground.
Yeah, WEH. In reality, they operated more like a cult, and that doesn't surprise me at all, because guess what? They had about 10 teenagers from white middle-class families.
All right.
And they were happy to sort of trade their really nice life for a dingy San Francisco apartment to discuss ways to overthrow the capital state. It reminds me of something that happens currently, but I can't think what. Their slogan, death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of the people. Terribly catchy, but, death to the fascist insect
what was that?
Preys.
That's their what?
That's their slogan.
It's a shit slogan, guys.
It's not real. You've got to really remember it. Death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of the people.
Does it at least have a good acronym? Not really. No.
I don't know. Well, I don't take me so long to work it out.
I feel like they want to call themselves. Yeah. I feel like, we'll call ourselves defreeze, right? And then we'll just make up words that fit with that, but it's obviously not because it's death to the. But anyway, fascist blah, 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 insect. The fascist insect.
Yes. So when we meet the SLA, they're at a time where they are hell-bent on freeing 2 members of their gang from prison. And this is confusing for me, and this was covered in the interview that I saw as well, but I'm still not 100% sure of why this happened. But 2 of the Symbionese Liberation Army's 2 of them, 2 SLA gunmen had recently been jailed, so this is 1973, I guess it would have been, for murdering a local superintendent with cyanide-tipped bullets. Now, this is the bit that I don't really get.
Why bother? Like, if you're going to shoot
starters, he was black. He was the first black administrator, I think, in educational administrator in the state. So I would have thought they would like that. He wanted to introduce student ID cards at Oakland schools.
Fuck that. We've got to shoot him with cyanide tips.
That's the reason they murdered him. I think I'm missing something that I might have said.
Well, I'm wondering, is that some kind of,
tracking
misplaced concern about people's
I think it is.
identity, or even, if you want to go biblical, give people a number and
yes,
and
I think that's it.
Start of the Armageddon, or
I think that's what it is.
Nonsense
from what I could gather, and I couldn't find a whole lot about it, but that is this sort of starting point that these. Because the thing that sort of threw me the most was the fact that the guy was black and he was the first person who'd been in that position. I would have thought that would be something to be celebrated, but it's the ID card that he was going to introduce, which is the key piece of information that, wow, you don't want to mess with these guys. Anyway, so it's at this point.
I've just got to say, sorry, the whole time you've been talking, when you were talking earlier about DeFreeze being that kind of Black Panther look, I could not get the image of Eddie Griffin out of my mind from Undercover Brother. I don't know if you've ever seen it, 2002 film. And so I'm just going to share my screen for a second.
So they're similar. There's Donald David DeFreeze.
I don't think they are similar, but this is the kind of feeling. Where am I? I just can't get it out of my head, so I have to share it with you because it's making me laugh quietly to myself. See this guy?
Yeah, it is kind of similar. Yeah, he's just slightly bigger afro, that's all. But yeah, these
he's got a huge
cool,
but everything about him is like, every time
Undercover Brother.
Like, you've got to watch it. It's quite funny. Yes. Anyway, sorry. That's what I'm picturing. But this is kind of comics, which so I probably shouldn't see it as funny because I'm sure this guy's very angry.
It is, but I mean, you would have to think that if this came across like my desk and I didn't realise it was real, I would have assumed it was for a movie, like a comedy. It says wanted by the FBI for bank robbery, interstate flight, possession of homemade bomb, robbery, receiving stolen property, assault with force, and then his name, Donald David DeFreeze. And then it's got his aliases underneath, and they are
DJ Freeze,
Don Chink DeFreeze, Donald John DeFreeze, Donald DeFrez, John DeFreel, David DeFreeze, spelled different, Donald DeFreeze, Donald DeFrez, Frizz, David Kenneth Robinson, Stephen Robinson, Donald David Thomas, Chinque, and Cinque. I would have thought that was a joke, but that's the head of the SLA.
It's this guy, sorry.
So that's who the SLA is. So we've got a missing Patty Hearst. The FBI are onto it. The SLA,
Eddie Griffin running around.
Yeah, the SLA have come forward and said, "Hey, it's us.
It's us. Haha. We've got her."
So why Patty? Why specifically Patty? I'm sure there are a couple of heiress going around.
She was her grandfather, perhaps.
But obviously it has a little bit to do with that. So let's look at the obvious stuff. The obvious stuff is she's a beautiful blonde heiress. She is a bit of what you would call an American princess in the sense that she's from, old money. And I think they saw that as being a very symbolic thing to show that she would sort of stand for the media and the government and everything that stood for it. But
she represents capitalism.
She does.
Right.
But one of the things that was actually the reality was she lived down the road. So when her mother had published, correct, very convenient, when her mother had published the engagement announcement. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this, but when that was all done through a newspaper and you'd have people's addresses, The apartment's address,
on it.
they had their address.
See, we talk about the ID card being so offensive because it helps you track people, but putting someone's address in the newspaper is insane.
So she was a local heiress, and that made it very easy for them to just go, well, we'll just pop down the road and get it.
Okay.
It's our neck of the woods, our neighbourhood.
Paris Hilton and their mother puts an address up somewhere. Yeah.
But can you believe it? That's how they got the address, was through the engagement announcement. So, so they saw that her family were in control. Sorry.
Going back to your point about how we're on the cusp of innocence lost, by even putting your address in, you just didn't think something like this would happen to you, because it has been what people had done for, 100 years at this point. And also they probably had a false sense of security being, heiresses and connected and wealthy and protected in a lot of ways. So anyway, it's interesting, isn't it? To your point about that culture shift happening.
Absolutely. And look, I'm sure that there was a little bit more to it than just rocking up all the night. As I said, they were obviously stalking her a little bit. And there are two apartments side by side that are identical. So, they just sort of watched her. But they saw her as from a family that was in control of a media empire that the SLA viewed as an arm of propaganda for the US government. They had determined that she was an easy target, and they thought that the propaganda that could be generated from it would be perfect.
Fox News.
Yeah. What they intended...
Sky News.
They intended to exchange Hearst for two SLA militants, the one who had murdered the superintendent, who had been detained for shooting and killing the Oakland school administrator with shots tipped
Don't
with
get the tipped in cyanide. If
I
you're
know.
going to shoot someone, why poison them as well?
I don't know. It comes up later. She talks about she doesn't, but she was obviously briefed on it. But anyway, it comes up again later. But that's why I say it. Otherwise, I would have just left it out. But that's why Patty Hearst. Where is Patty Hearst?
Time.
Well, we know that after they took her first of all to a house in the suburbs, and she spent a little bit of time there before they actually just took her to an apartment they had in San Francisco in the city, and they put her in a closet. So that's currently where Patty is. Well, not currently, where she was at the time, on the night of February 4th and into the 5th.
The least you could do is give someone a comfortable bed and a room.
Not at this point. So 2 days after her kidnapping, a tape was sent to Hearst's father and to a local San Francisco radio station. And it's a recording of her, and it says, "Mum, Dad, I'm okay," Hearst could be heard saying in the recording. "I'm not being starved or beaten or unnecessarily frightened. I just hope that you'll do what they say, Daddy, and do it quickly." And apparently she was absolutely the apple of her father's eye. Not that it would necessarily matter if you were or you weren't, but they were onto it. They really wanted to help. So despite his wealth and influence, Randolph Hearst couldn't convince the San Francisco authorities to swap the two imprisoned SLA members to save his daughter. They couldn't come at that.
We don't negotiate with.
Don't worry. The SLA, found that out. They're like, all right. They, however, came back with another offer.
Mm-hmm.
They would free Hearst if her father held a food drive for the poor.
Oh, that's quite
That
nice.
sounds kind of straightforward. But hang on, who's the poor and how many, and what are we looking at
400
here?
million people.
Okay, well, pouring in $500,000 of his own money. And remember, he really didn't have access to a hell of a lot of money, as well as $1.5 million donation from his late father's trust. The food drive occurred. It occurred in Oakland on February 22. And the idea was they had said the SLA wanted $70 worth of food for every person in need. I don't know if it was in the state. I presume it was in the area. But anyway, long story short, it was a disaster. Why? Huge crowds converged to collect the free food, and volunteers were literally on the back of trucks trying to give the food to the people, and panic started, and so then they were throwing the food and the goods from the back of the trucks at people. Fights broke out. Windows were broken nearby. it was just a sea of
some
people.
widows at the same time, I'm sure.
A police officer was stabbed, and the food drive, it quickly just turned into a riot. It didn't work. So although it started, because it was, that's a lot of food in those days, $2 million worth of food, it was started, and it wasn't all going to happen in one day. It was over a period of time, but it was essentially just a disaster.
Disbanded, yep.
It soon became clear to DeFreeze and his gang of followers that they were not going to be able to leverage Hearst for what they wanted.
Well, the thing is, we're dealing with people who can't organise a piss up in a brewery, let alone a food drive to the poor.
Yeah, it hasn't gone so well.
We should just let her go because these people are useless.
So it was around this time that they started whispering things through the door of the closet, and they started telling Patty that her family was doing nothing to save her. And then they start
brainwashing her.
Correct. Yeah, so they start explaining their political ethos and their plan for a post-capitalist utopia.
Mm.
So that's how the shift starts, from her being a tool that they were using to leverage to get,
money or
publicity,
stuff,
people out of jail, the people released, and then switching that to food, money, and then now it's like, oh, that's not going to work. So what are we going to do?
So we have to brainwash her into being an agent of ours, so that when she gets all that money, she can give it to us later, maybe.
And throughout, like her
long bow to draw, but
her father held many press conferences. I mean, he was me as well. Yeah.
Can you imagine how horrendous that would be for the family? To have your daughter held by some whack jobs, and your food thing didn't work out, and he sunk $2 million in 1974, which would have been what, $10-15 million today's standards.
It was a lot, yeah.
Mum and Dad bought their house at the time for like $70,000, I think, in about 74. It's worth about $3 million now.
So at the same time as them starting to sort of tell her, you're being left here, no one's doing for you, so your family are doing nothing for you. She says that's when they sort of start to threaten her with death, and say, what use are you to us kind of thing. Then also they'd go from that to them being quite, not necessarily nice, but including her in conversations. She was still in the closet at that point, in the closet. But this is sort of overdone.
Sorry.
No. So she's been kidnapped on the.
I thought she got away. I said, did she ever come out? And you went,
yeah. Oh, sorry. I know I didn't hear. I thought you meant the closet. She gets out of the closet. She
doesn't come out gay, is what you're saying.
No, she doesn't come out gay.
Right.
No.
For a minute there, I thought, this is not the way I thought this story was going to go.
So she was kidnapped on the 4th of Feb.
Yeah. And she's been held at this point for...
It's a couple of weeks at this point, because the giveaways, the food and the money runs out on March 27 at that point. So that's, nearly 8 weeks, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. It's a significant amount of time. And so she's been held this whole time. They've realised that they're not going to get...
solitary confinement too.
Yeah. So this is the time when things start to shift kind of thing. So after all those weeks in the closet, she's told that, all right, well, we might be able to trust you to come out. So before they'd been feeding her while she was blindfolded and all the rest. Mm. Then they start giving her like a torch so that she can start getting prepared and reading their sort of manifesto and their stuff that's,
right.
Hearst says that the SLA men began to rape her.
Mm.
Because their group claimed that she needed sexual freedom. And she has said, if you are going to break someone down, you clearly use everything that is at your disposal. And obviously sexual molestation is a really powerful way to attack a woman, and we all know that.
Yeah.
So after 2 grueling months, blindfolded in the closet, subjected to what she calls rape and torture, and repeatedly threatened with death, the SLA came to Hearst.
She calls rape. I mean...
Patty Hearst called rape. Because...
Yeah, is it refuted later? Because...
She says this later, yeah. So she survives.
But do we believe that she was raped?
Well, that will come up later. That's just what she's saying at this point.
All right, okay.
So after repeatedly, they've obviously tortured her and raped her and whatever else, and they come to her with an offer. They would release her if she wanted, or she could stay and join them.
Mm.
Hearst later told the jury in her trial that she didn't believe DeFreeze's offer of freedom was genuine, so she took the option that she knew would buy her a little more time. It didn't really look like that and work out like that when I tell you how things played out.
Mm.
When she acquiesced, they took her blindfold off so she could see her captors for the first time. And they also stripped her of her name, so she emerged from that closet with a new identity. And then the strangest things start to happen actually once she's out of the closet. What's happened up until this point is kind of a kidnap scenario.
Yeah.
What happens next is like someone wrote it for a movie. It's really, really bizarre. So 2 months after she's been abducted, an announcement is made, and it is, again, a recording that is released to the media on the 3rd of April. So remember, she was taken on the 4th of Feb?
Feb, yeah.
Yeah, and it's announced on audio tape, and it is basically saying that the heiress is going to switch sides and she's joining her captors, the SLA. And in doing that, she has a new name, and she is now Tanya. And they say that it's a tribute to Che Guevara, and he had a comrade. And the name, of course, I've never heard of, but having looked up, I think it's pronounced Haydee, because it's got an accent over the E. Haydee Tamara, which is obviously where she got the Tanya from, I guess. Bunky Beater.
But sing, you fools, but you got it wrong. Enjoy your prayers because you haven't got long. Your queen is dead. Your king is through. She's not coming back for you. That's from Evita. It's Che Guevara pretends to be, Tim Rice and Lloyd Webber wrote the narrator of Evita to be effectively Che Guevara, but it's all fictionalized. But but I've always wanted to play Che Guevara. Anyway.
Well, I think I've heard of this, but I'd forgotten. So it's a
She's not the only one who died. Yeah.
A nom de guerre. So you have your name of war. So that Tanya became her nom de guerre. So here's a quote from her at that time. It says, 2 months after she's been taken, I have been given the choice of 1, being released in a safe area, or 2, joining the forces of the Symbionese Liberation Army and fighting for my freedom and the freedom of all oppressed people. So she said that on the tape that was released on April 3rd, 1974. And it finishes with, I have chosen to stay and fight.
Well, power to you, girlfriend.
Thus starts one of the most confounding crimes in American history, where we see someone where they have a transformation from victim to revolutionary. And it is really quite remarkable if you think about where it started, what her identity was, how she was viewed, and then for her to come out and say this, to say that it ruffled some feathers was just kind of an understatement.
Quite a short period of time, the 3 months.
Yeah. Well, 2 months, two.
April, February, March,
April. She was kidnapped on the 4th of March. 4th of April. February, March, April.
Yeah, 3 months.
2 months. February,
March,
April.
All right, 2 months. Anyway, point is, it's a very short period of time, but what we don't know is how susceptible she was to anything prior to going in the closet. So she could have had a personality that was quite susceptible to influence anyway.
Yeah.
And she'd had a very sheltered life, very, you know, so all of a sudden she's in the middle of this very traumatic scenario.
Yes.
And, you know, like you can't someone else's experience based on someone else's experience, right? So we've done stories. I think you did was it JC Duggart, who was the poor lass who was taken in 20 years or something in a bunker, or, you know, I've done the girls who were in the bunker for forever, right, with that mad rapist.
Yep.
But they also were, well, I mean, the guy was feeding them lines and terrifying them, but he wasn't trying to manipulate them in this sort of way. So, I think it's just really hard to know what's going to tick
the conversations that we would be having 50 years later compared to what people would have been capable of even talking about in those days. You know what I mean? Their understanding of mental health, how things play out. You know, we've been exposed to so many different things and heard so many different theories and experiences in those 50 years. I could only imagine, I think this really split people straight down the middle. There wasn't a lot of grey area for people. It was either, oh gosh, she's a bad person now, or she's been brainwashed. It was black or white for people. That was it. There was really very little grey area because people just didn't know what that really meant. Do you know what I mean? Well, what do you mean she's changed sides? What do you mean she's changed her name? You know, how's this happened? They didn't really understand all of the intricacies of that mental anguish and whatever else that you would be exposed to being kidnapped.
She wasn't just kidnapped. She was effectively kept in solitary confinement in a cupboard for 2 months. And when she finally was allowed out a bit, she was then molested, you know, raped, horrible things happened to her. I mean, it doesn't take that much to break your psyche, I think. So you can imagine almost from where she came from, because I get where she's coming from in the kind of, I didn't believe him. I thought he was going to knock me off. So I just thought I better stay. You know, I get that. I understand it. I don't know, however, like if I was in the same scenario, whether or not I would just capitulate and then become a revolutionary, or I just
look for I'll go home, thanks.
Any opportunity I can to just
give me the option,
fuck off out of there and go to the nearest police station and say,
exactly,
I've been kidnapped, I'm Patty Hearst. But they're not living her experience. So I can't.
I know. It's really hard. Know? And, you know, I've seen.
And she was taken in her house too, right? So there would be this whole thing of, I'm never going to be safe. They know where I am. They know who I am.
Of course, you know, our whole family is. Yeah. It's hard. I don't think, you know, she says, he says, whatever else. And there are people still alive who were with her, and one of them says, for instance, she hated a mum. She didn't want to go home to a mum. I'm like, okay, well, you know, most teenagers have a bit of an issue. Yeah, I'm not so. But, then they were like, well, was she really in love with her fiancé? Because obviously she never saw him again, not that bothered. That was a bit odd.
Weed.
Yeah, poor
the shit kicked out of him.
Imagine that. Imagine you're Hearst and then your daughter starts going, some bloke called Steve Weed. Who's like, I don't know, 6 years older than a teacher at school. I wouldn't be happy.
What I want to know is...
No wonder she hated a mum, because if I tell you what, if I was a mum, I'd be fucking bitch on wheels if someone came, if I was, Mummy Hearst and my heiress daughter came home and said, oh, I'm in love with teacher
my
at school.
Teacher who's 6
and we're going to get
senior,
married.
And his name's Weed. No,
not on my watch, darling.
Closet.
Yeah. It's like she was probably just too scared to go home. You'd be too scared to come home to me if that were the case too.
FYI, boys, don't be bringing home any unsuitable ladies.
No, well, we don't have to worry about anyone being an heiress, so that's or an heir or anything. So we don't have these problems to worry about. But yes, I could imagine if I was that mother, I wouldn't be well pleased. I would not.
You say
well
that,
pleased.
but look at Princess, what's her name, Mary, who went to the 2000 Olympics where we were in Sydney at the same time. Why didn't we meet him? Anyway, sliding endorsement, Carl. It could have been
sure.
You all right.
My God, absolutely.
Actually, it couldn't have been me because Andy was over at that point in time. So I was unavailable. But it could have been you. Anyway, my point is, you think there's no heirs or heiresses or whatever around, and then suddenly a Moldovan prince shows up. I know he's not Moldovan, but
Danish.
Princess Diaries. I'm thinking about the Princess Diaries.
Oh yes, right. I was going to say why she said that. I know it's got a familiar ring, but there you go. I don't think I've actually ever watched the Princess Diaries. So when there's lots, there's so many times it comes up where there's references to it, and I'm always going, what? And then I think, it's a Princess Diaries reference.
Do you know what I'm enjoying about this? Our recording with just the two of us for once. Is that we haven't got Clarky going, good chat. Anyway, move on.
Probably out of control. Yes.
Anyway, tell me more. So, all right, we've established we have no idea. We can't judge how her brain works.
No, I can't. And it's quite difficult to tell a story like that because in many ways I'm kind of getting ahead if I'm saying what she said because obviously she's still alive or was still alive when she was able to talk about it. And that's her version of things versus, say, the SLA's version of things. We
can't refute either of them. We weren't there.
No, exactly. So I'm trying to sort of...
be balanced.
Puzzle this story together a bit and sort of say this is what I can find about it, really. Not really saying whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise. This is what I found quite interesting.
Which would be why I assume that when I asked earlier about... You said that Patty's version of events was that she'd been raped. That's why I asked about it. Like, was that a proven fact or that's her alleging that? And you kind of alluded to her alleging it.
Yeah. No, so she's elected to stay with them and then she starts her daily lessons. So she has lessons plus duties, plus they give her weapons drills and, they sort of...
Cool. So
I guess they're basically indoctrinate her. Although apparently she knew how to use a gun because her father had taught her when she was younger. So again... Cray Mary. Yeah, absolutely. So that wasn't a big thing. Angela Atwood.
In 1974, my father was teaching me how to use a gun too. All right, 5 years later, but,
Angela Atwood, who was the girl who was an actress who became part of the SLA. Yeah.
My card's broken down.
She told Hearst that the others wanted... told Hearst that the others wanted Hearst to share in the sexual freedom within the unit, but Hearst later had said that she was raped by both Willie Wolfe, who was one of the SLA members, and of course Freeze, who was the head honcho.
Does no one in this place have a serious name? Willie Wolfe and
DeFreeze. No, it doesn't sound like it. So where are we headed with this? What's all this training and what is she going to do with it, or what are the SLA going to do with it? Well, let me tell you. On the 15th of April, so 2 weeks roughly, just before, since she's come out and said, my name is Tanya, we see her in action. First was recorded on a surveillance video. Now, this is important because this is 1974 and this crime occurs in a bank. And apparently not all banks had video footage and they suggest that this bank was chosen so that it was filmed. They would have the footage of her doing this.
Because they were about publicity.
Yes, absolutely. So on April 15, 1974, Patty Hearst was recorded on surveillance video wielding an M1 carbine.
Jeepers.
Yeah, while robbing the Sunset District branch of the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. I don't know, Hibernia?
How do you spell it?
HIB. I've heard it said, but it doesn't sound the same as it looks. HIBERNIA. Hibernia Bank. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Hibernia.
Hibernia Bank. Don't know why does that struggle so badly with that? The Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. Hearst, identified under her pseudonym or her nom de guerre, yelled, "I'm Tanya. Up against the wall, motherfuckers." Racy language, Tanya.
Motherfuckers.
Two men entered the bank while the robbery was occurring and were shot and wounded by the SLA. According to testimony at her trial, I'm giving that away. Actually, just ignore that. Cut that bit out. Let's not say that. You don't need to know. So it's at this point that those images are then shared, nationally, internationally. And it's very clear.
She didn't shoot them, though, or did she shoot? No.
No, right. She didn't. That Patty Hearst is now
a
gorilla. Yes, an urban gorilla, she describes her. Yeah. Attorney General William B. Saxby said that Hearst was a common criminal and not a reluctant participant in the bank robbery.
Well,
And some have suggested it might have been voluntary, contrasting with earlier comment in which that she might have been coerced. The FBI agent heading the investigation said that SLA members were photographed, and this is important, pointing guns at Hearst during the robbery.
Interesting.
Yeah. And this comes up again in the trial and whatever else. And it's true. Like, there's not one, there's two of them. They've got their guns aimed at her, trained on her. Yeah, not on her. So she was, certainly at that point, she was what I think you play by the rules.
Mother uckers.
Or don't think you're going to play along to this point and then get out. Like, not now.
Oh, we are. We are ensuring that you are trapped with us now.
Yep. So then we skip ahead a little, another month later. So now we're in May of 1974. And on May 16, 1974, the manager at Mel's Sporting Goods in Inglewood, California, observed a minor theft by a man by the name of William Harris. He had been shopping there with his wife, Emily. And it just so happens that they are also SLA members, and they have Patty Hearst waiting across the road in a van while they go and conduct their minor theft. The manager and an employee followed Harris. Yeah, I don't know what they took. The manager and an employee followed Harris and his wife out, and they confronted him. There was a scuffle, and the manager restrained Harris when a pistol fell out of Harris's waistband. Patty Hearst discharged the entire magazine of an automatic carbine that she had, into the overhead storefront, causing the manager to dive behind a light post. He tried to shoot back, but Hearst began aiming closer.
So she's firing warning shots.
She's firing warning shots.
She's not trying to kill him. Yeah,
no. So Hearst and the Harrises.
She opened it up. On them. Yeah.
So now they're sort of on the run from the latest from Mel's Sporting Good. Hearst and the Harris couple hijack two cars and abduct the owners. One was a young man who found Hearst so personable that he was reluctant to report the incident. He testified at trial to her discussing the effectiveness of cyanide-tipped bullets. Wonder where she got that from.
Yeah, but the thing is, how can you test the effectiveness of cyanide-tipped bullets unless you have done a autopsy to determine whether the person died from the effect of the bullet?
I don't know what their obsession with it is.
Poisoning.
What's your obsession, SLA, with cyanide-tipped bullets? Can't they just be just bullets for the bullet's sake?
Literally overkill. It is
literally overkill. I like that. That's very funny. Patty also asked
without a single laugh in it.
No.
That's very funny.
Maybe I should have said very clever. And she also repeatedly asked him if he was okay.
Well, I did just steal your car. Are you okay, darling?
Yes. So whilst this has gone down at Mel's Sporting Goods, the police, who have been sort of tracking everybody around a little bit, have had enough. And they head to the main base of the SLA in Los Angeles. So not San Francisco, but Los Angeles. And that happens before Patty Hearst and the Harrises can return. So if that's where they were headed, they end up in Los Angeles. So I presume they were actually. But the police surround this SLA, safe house, I guess you could call it. There were 6 SLA members inside the house, and there was an hour-long gunfight, with police, where they can say retrospectively that 2 of the members were fatally shot and a fire broke out in the house, in which the remainder died.
It's the Kelly gang all over again.
DeFreeze was in there, and
they all
killed
died
himself.
In the fire.
They all did.
Right.
Yeah. 6 of them were inside, but they didn't know that. They didn't know who was in there when the shootout happened, and they didn't know if Patty was in there. They assumed she was, I think.
Yeah.
So when this is all going on, and the fire, I don't think they set the fire on purpose. I think maybe they did it themselves. It was just like, we're out, right? So it's pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
So you just don't think this is where this is all headed, right?
It's like a Waco moment.
It's crazy.
The fuzz are here. We'll just kill ourselves now. What?
So it wasn't until they were able to go through the bodies to work out who everybody was and how they had either succumbed to a gunshot wound in the fire or self-inflicted. They were able to work it out. And as I said, they initially thought Patty was in there, but she was not. She apparently was in Anaheim, somewhere near Disneyland, watching this play out on TV or, the news or whatever else. So they were
in hiding. For a trip. Going to Disneyland.
Now, this is where I start to sort of become very difficult for me to get a grip of.
Impartial or?
No, not that. More like how these things went down, I don't quite understand. So the three that are left, the Harrises, Emily Harris, the wife, apparently she goes to the Berkeley rally to commemorate the death of Angela Atwood. Remember Angela was door knocker, whatever else? Yeah. Someone called Solistic, I don't know who that is, must be another one of the SLA, and DeFries, who we clearly know who was. So there was a rally to commemorate their death during the police, what they call, the police siege. So it was, the police are bad because they've killed them, whatever else. So how Emily Harris got to go there and not be
picked up,
I'm surprised.
She might have had dark glasses and a hat on.
I don't know what she did, but I mean,
I
would have thought they'd turn up. Anyway, while she's there, she runs into somebody who had known them all, and he was a radical. Anyway, so he helps them. His name's Jack Scott, and he provides them with money and help. Now, I can't find it in anything written, but in the interview that I watched, it was talking to a journalist who has been around the entire time and, was young at the time. And he says they ended up, on the East Coast. They moved around. They had help from money.
On the lam.
Yeah, people were helping them out. They weren't, left.
Were they, at this point, FBI most wanted or something? Why is everyone helping them out?
I don't know. I'm surprised that they haven't been caught. I don't think she's that good.
No, but also I don't think she's that much of a threat.
No.
People who did the killing and organised all this are now dead in a house.
Yep.
She's just like a secondary, she's a high-profile one, but she's a secondary.
Well, she's been involved in bank robbery and then kidnapping of the boy.
And it's all on films.
Yeah.
If she kidnapped a car, she's very nice to the man. He almost didn't even report it. She hasn't gone out of it. And even in that situation with the Harrises when she could have shot at that store manager to kill him, she clearly didn't.
Yeah, but she then kind of went on to do a couple of other little things where she was involved. So in terms of other stuff that they were doing, so I guess it's proven that she was able to, she wasn't able to, she wanted to, she did. She essentially helped make improvised explosive devices, and they were used in 2 unsuccessful attempts to kill police officers.
All right, Patty, you overstepped the line now. Right, okay.
Yeah, I don't really understand but that's in 75, so that's a year later. So that she's been on the run for at least a year at that point. And one of the devices failed to detonate. They found marked money in an apartment where she had been, and that was connected to the SLA robbery.
Bank robbery, yeah.
Yeah, there was another bank robbery. She was a getaway driver for that robbery. And then importantly, a lady called Myrna Opsal, a mother of 4, who was in a bank when they went into a bank robbery to make a deposit, was shot dead by Emily Harris. So remember I told you about the Harrises and the thing? Yeah. So it was really...
Yeah, escalating.
It was escalating. It just kept going on. I mean, they're just why are they robbing all these banks for what if they're also being supported? So if I don't know.
I feel like they've lost their way because, their guy who founded them's dead now. And so they're just running around having to steal money so they can keep running around.
Yeah.
But, there's no strategy around any of this. It's just we'll just go rob a bank. They have just become criminals. And they were always criminals, just to be clear. And they were always terrorists, the whole group I'm talking about. But, they could sit. Remember we had this debate where Clarky with the Kelly gang, because it's, 200 years difference. But
yeah.
Clarky was basically saying, when you're oppressed by the government, whatever, at what point do you stand up? You just, no, bullshit, right? You don't go around killing people. And this is the same scenario. Certainly DeFries, being in 1974 and being a black man, I can appreciate that he probably did have an axe to grind.
Yes.
And I feel like all those other young followers that came along were just wanting something to cling to. They wanted, to be part of something.
Yep.
So they get indoctrinated in it, including Patty perhaps.
Yep.
But you go totally over a line when all of the people that have organised all of that, and that's like, you remember when we did the one about the Mother God?
Yeah.
That disbanded, right?
More crazy California, actually.
That was insane. But after she died, the whole thing sort of fell apart. And that's what you would expect to have happen. But that's not what's happening here. And now it's turned into something else. It's not what it was originally set out to be. It's not this, political movement or whatever. It's more just some idiots running around robbing banks and killing people.
Yeah. Well, you'll be glad to know that it's over, because as quickly as that's all started, they just go and arrest them, they find them.
Good.
There's no other aspect.
Because they're idiots running around.
It's crazy. So on September 18, 1975, September. So this started in
so about 18
February
months she's been
correct.
Embroiled in this. Yep.
First was arrested in a San Francisco apartment with a woman called Wendy Yoshimura, who was another SLA member. I guess she joined later on, or I don't know. Don't know how many there were. Don't do cults. Yeah, don't do cults. And, she was in, there's a whole host of people that were there for the arresting, San Francisco police officers, FBI agents. So I think it was quite a scene. But while being booked into jail, and this is important again, Hearst listed her occupation as urban guerrilla. She asked her attorney to relay the following message. Tell everybody that I'm smiling, that I feel free and strong, and I send my greetings and love to all the sisters and brothers out there. So at that moment, she's still very much Tanya and, part of this whole SLA movement. At the time of her arrest, her weight had plummeted to 40 kilos, and she was described by psychologist Margaret Singer in October of 75 as a low IQ, low effect zombie. Wow.
It's the 40 kilos.
Yeah.
Ooh, so that's how I lose the weight. I'm going to have to join a cult. Right.
Absolutely. Shortly after her arrest, doctors recorded signs of trauma. Her IQ was measured as 112, where it had previously been 130. There were huge gaps in her memory regarding her pre-Tanya life. She was smoking heavily and had nightmares. But without a mental illness or defect, a person is considered to be fully responsible for any criminal action not done under duress, which is defined as a clear and present threat of death or serious injury. For Hearst to secure an acquittal on the grounds of having been brainwashed would have been completely unprecedented. It is not a defence in law.
At that time.
Brainwash was not a defence, correct.
Well, so when we say brainwashing, it's more the mental health piece.
Yes.
And to your point, it wasn't a thing. So you either had a diagnosed illness like schizophrenia or you were fine, thanks.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
You couldn't have been
as a result of happening. Yeah. Yes.
Which is really funny because when we think about MK Ultra and lots of other things that were going on where people were, using psychological trauma and stuff to influence people, it's not like they didn't know about it. They're just from a legal standard, it was like, nah, you're either sane or you already had an illness.
Yep.
Or you're criminally insane.
It's interesting because she talks about an interview that she's spent with a professor, I think or I guess he was a psychologist from Yale, and he's got lots of books on coercive persuasion and thought reform. And he said that after interviewing 50 hours, she was a classic case which met all the psychological criteria of a coerced prisoner of war. He said that if I had reacted differently, that would have made me suspect. So then they wouldn't have believed me, and I would have been killed. So I had to behave in the way that I was. I was doing what I had to do to
survive.
To start with, then I just, became brainwashed, I guess.
Programmed.
Yes. So she had a couple of different lawyers, and by the end her defence was going to be a defence of coercion or duress affecting intent at the time of the offence, because, as I said, brainwashing defence was warned that it was not a defence in law. Yeah. So she gave lots and lots of interviews to psychiatrists to try and work through what the damage had, or, how she'd been broken and why she'd behaved the way she had. So then we go to the trial, and it's not nearly as interesting as I thought that it would be. It's very complicated because it's all about whether or not what she did was considered to be brainwashed. Was it, Stockholm syndrome? Was she doing it because she actually just was a brat who wanted a wild ride and to have some other kind of life, and she was actually loving it? There was conversation around the fact that she was actually in love with Willie Wolfe and that she held a piece of jewelry or something. So one of the other SLA girls well, kind of dobbed her in many ways and said that she still had it, and she did. And then she gave some stupid reason that she thought it was some like a pre-Columbian artifact or something. So there was some weird stuff that was going along. And I also read that when she was put on what's it called when you're on trial, when you get put on the No. When you're actually on the stand. When she got put on the stand, apparently she was dreadful. They said they thought it was because she was the kind of drugs that they had her on, like in prison or whatever else. She was just not a great, I don't know.
They don't usually put
She didn't help herself,
stand.
no. And that's what they were saying. Should she have even been put on the stand?
Probably not.
She made a poor impression. She was lethargic. They thought it was.
They shouldn't have put her on the stand.
Yeah,
and bad defence.
There's a couple of things that they talk about where her defence. I think she even talks about feels that she was sort of let down by them, and then the other stuff sort of started happening external to what was going on with her. There was a bomb exploded at Hearst Castle.
Crile.
Yep, Crile Castle in February of '76 after Hearst testified that Wolfe had raped her. Emily Harris
what's
gave
the connection to that?
Whenever she'd say something about certain people, things would start to happen.
Oh, right.
As I said, they talked about this trinket that then someone gave an interview and said, actually, he didn't rape her. They were, she had a thing. They're an item. Yep. And the jurors have actually said, or some of them afterwards found that they thought that when they found out that she did have this little thing that made them really start to think that the carving made them think that she was, trinket carving thing.
Ticky.
Yeah, well, things like that. Some was it pre-Columbian artifact.
When you're saying it, and then you call it a carving, I'm like, it's one of those little ticky shit things.
I think it was some little bit of tat. You probably got it somewhere. And they thought it was quite powerful to suggest that she was lying if she was still holding on to something like that. The thing that I've got to read this because I think it's quite funny actually, although really was not very funny for Patty Hearst. In her autobiography, Patty Hearst expressed disappointment with what she saw as Bailey, who was her defense lawyer, lack of focus in the crucial end stage of her trial. She described him as having the appearance of someone who was with a hangover and spilling water down the front of his pants while making a disjointed closing argument. So this was his final statement to the court. And I'll just try and read it because...
Jesus, I'm fucking hungover.
Yeah, it starts like this. But simple application of the rules, I think, will yield one decent result, and that is there is not anything close to proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Patty Hearst wanted to be a bank robber. What you know, and you know in your hearts, to be true is beyond dispute. There was talk of her dying and she wanted to survive. It's not very compelling, is it? It's sort of like that's the best you've got after going through a trial of a woman who was kidnapped and, tortured and
I think
brainwashed.
On balance, and when you talk
not
about
terribly compelling.
When we talk about beyond reasonable doubt, it's on balance, right? So all things being equal, so all things aren't equal where we have a scenario where a person was kidnapped, that's irrefutable.
Yep.
Against their will, irrefutable, and then held in a closet, abused. Is it possible that they went on, and to his point, she never had set out to go to university to learn to be a bank robber or had shown any predisposition to any of that behaviour prior to this incident happening. So I think that's what he was trying to say. But you're right.
Yeah, but it just seems so lackluster.
Didn't quite
really go. No. So on March 20, 1976, Patty Hearst was convicted of bank robbery and using a firearm during the commission of a felony. She was given the maximum sentence possible of 35 years imprisonment.
Jesus Christ.
Yep. Pending a reduction of final sentence hearing. But Carter, who is the judge, declined to specify. He then died. So another judge determined her sentence. He gave her 7 years imprisonment, commenting that rebellious young people who, for whatever reason, become revolutionaries and voluntarily commit criminal acts will be punished.
You're just a naughty little girl.
Yes, it's kind of,
Yeah.
Now, it got a little bit tricky when she was in prison. So they held her in solitary confinement for security reasons. She was granted bail for an appeal hearing in November 1976 on the condition that she was protected on bond. So her father hired dozens of bodyguards to look after her.
It's still there for her.
Her bail was revoked in May 1978 when appeals failed and the Supreme Court declined to hear her case. The prison took no special security measures for her safety until she found a dead rat on her bunk on the day when William and Emily Harris were arraigned for her abduction. The Harrises were convicted on a simple kidnapping charge as opposed to the more serious kidnapping for ransom or kidnapping with bodily injury. and they were released after each serving 8 years. This is where we were talking about Jonestown and where it comes back full circle.
Emily Harris killed that woman.
Comes up later. That's a different trial.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm like, fucking hell.
You're right.
She's doing 7 years
that's
and
still
she didn't
just
even
in
kill
relation.
anyone. Right.
That happened 2 years later, actually, I think. So I know you won't remember this, but Representative Leo Ryan was a man who flew down and
got killed. Yeah.
Yes. So Representative Leo Ryan was collecting signatures on a petition for Hearst's release several weeks before he was murdered while visiting the Jonestown settlement in Guyana. John Wayne spoke after the Jonestown cult deaths, stating that people had accepted that Jim Jones had brainwashed 900 individuals into mass suicide, but would not accept that the Symbionese Liberation Army could have brainwashed a kidnapped teen girl. Go John Wayne.
Yes, but he was a red wing, right wing, fucking
gun tote. Yeah.
He's problematic, although my father loved him.
Yes.
And, he should have finished that sentence with, "Fill your hand, you son of a bitch."
What's the one where you take my hand off? Is he the one who said get off the gun? Who said that? Off my blood? Oh, no, hang on. Don't include this, but there's some guy from the Rifle Association.
No, that's probably...
Who's that?
Charlton Heston? Was it Charlton Heston?
Yes, is that from a movie or something like that? Yeah.
Don't know, but the one I did, True Grit, Rooster Cogburn, he played, John Wayne playing Rooster Cogburn. Yeah. And there's this bit in it where, I can't remember the name of the actor, famous actor playing the bad guy, says to him, he goes, Willie, I'm going to take you in. And he says something like, what is a one-eyed fat man going to do to us? And Rooster turns around and he does this look and he's like my father, how very dare you? And he's like, "Fill your hand, you son of a bitch." And he fires, races down on a horse and fires and takes them all out. Anyway, I think, however, regardless of whether or not John Wayne was slightly problematic in certain aspects of his life, he makes a very valid point.
I think he does. I really think he does. So other big names that we know. President Jimmy Carter commuted Hearst's federal sentence to the 22...
Okay. Just start again.
Yeah. So President Jimmy Carter commuted Hearst's federal sentence to the 22 months she'd already served, freeing her 8 months before she was eligible for her first parole hearing.
So how long had she done?
22 months in total.
So she had a 7-year sentence with a 22-month parole.
Yeah, so it started off 35, went down to 7, then she ended up doing 22 months.
Yeah, but she was eligible for parole at 22 months in that 7-year one. Yeah, okay.
Can you imagine she was released on February the 1st, 1979. Could you imagine, you're about to celebrate your next birthday? Whoa, I remember being ready to celebrate my 20th birthday a couple of years ago.
The last 5 years,
roller coaster. Oh, what a roller coaster.
It's just a blur. I can't remember most of it.
Yeah, so she was under stringent conditions and she remained on probation for the state sentence of the sporting goods store police. So when she had been involved with Mel's Sporting Good. However, she recovered full civil rights when President Bill Clinton granted her a pardon on his last day in office on January 20, 2001. After she was released from prison, just 2 months after she was released from prison, Hearst married Bernard.
She went on a rampage. No, just kidding.
She married Bernard Lee Shaw, a policeman who was part of her security detail during her time on bail.
Oh.
They had 2 children, Gillian and Lydia Hearst Shaw. And they had a long and very happy marriage, and he passed away in 2013. But she now lives, I think, in New York, and she's a show dog mum. So she's got a dog that she shows, and she works on lots of charities. And I think she's also had a life which there's a famous director who's died recently, John Waters.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he cast her in quite a number of his films. She wrote an autobiography. So she's sort of dabbled in little bits and pieces, but I think that, there was no more wild revolutionary side of her that was sort of put to bed.
Culturally, things changed, and that fell out of favour anyway. It wasn't cool.
Yes.
And then, if you consider other domestic terrorism in the US following that, it went down a different path. It wasn't this sort of Black Panther-y thing.
No, that's very true. Actually, that kind of wound up, didn't it? Mm-hmm. She was interviewed by Larry King in 2001. And in it, she sort of says, "Our minds are far more fallible than we're willing to admit.
Correct.
We all think we're pretty strong and that nobody can make us do something if we don't want to do it. That's true until somebody locks you up in a closet and tortures you and finally makes you so weak that you completely break and will do anything they say. And I think that's very true. And I think that's something that certainly over the last 50 years, excuse me, time and time again in lots of different situations, whether it be domestic abuse, kidnapping, I can't think of anything else, just the two crimes. I worked on a podcast, that's pretty weak. But I mean,
No, but even not from a crime-related thing, you know, I think about in a work scenario, right, the number of times I'm asked to do things that I think that's just stupid and I shouldn't be doing it.
Yep.
Or it's just wrong and I shouldn't be doing it. But you're conditioned to be told you can't argue, you can't say no to the boss. So that conditioning she's talking about, I think, affects everyone.
Yes.
It's the short period of time, but it was a very traumatic and nasty period of time. And you're right, like as a 19-year-old who'd come from La La Land, you know, everything was all sweet and lovely and had never really had any major issues, that would have been exceptionally shocking for her. And she would not necessarily have had any kind of reserves of resilience.
No.
So I absolutely believe she was brainwashed.
I tend to.
Or programmed. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly at that age, especially at that age, I think.
And the thing I'll give her absolute credit for is in all of those scenarios, she didn't kill a person.
Yeah.
She didn't even injure a person.
No. Yeah.
She may well have been an unwilling participant, and even later on she might have been a willing participant, but she certainly didn't actually commit grievous bodily harm. So at best she's an accessory to these crimes. And so I can't believe she got 35 years for it. That's outrageous.
Well, yes, I think that's them trying to make an example as well, probably at that point.
Yeah, agreed.
I did have some notes and I just cannot seem to find them on what happened to the Harrises, but there was a separate trial and they did serve time for the murder of
a poor mother of four.
That name, I've forgotten her name. Meryl, I've forgotten. Anyway, because I've seen the foot.
Myrna something?
No, something like that.
It was one of those names. It was one of those old lady names.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen her son was there. Like he was only 15 at the time, so I saw him at the court.
He saw her
Myrna. You're right, Myrna Opsal. Yeah, Myrna Opsal.
That's awful.
Yeah,
just going to the bank, just trying to do a bit of admin. You know what I mean? Like
I think
freaking checks.
You think you had a bad day? That's a bad day.
Isn't that awful?
Right. So that, my friend, is the story of Patty Hearst, who now likes to go by the name of Patricia Hearst, but I mean, we know her as Patty Hearst.
Glad that she didn't try and disassociate herself entirely. I mean, she is who she is. And look, I know people who had more childish versions of their names and they've reverted to the longer form version. So that's not really a thing. I think that the people who need to be sentenced in this one are the SLA.
God, yeah.
You know, and maybe we should sentence them to a service level agreement where they have to respond to calls within a certain period of time and emails in a certain period of time, and they are not to be running around robbing banks or committing domestic terrorism. They're in a call centre and they have an SLA, and they're stuck to sit and meet their SLAs.
I think one of the nice
Someone's
things for them would be...
Someone's going to run around and take their, you know, what was it called? Grade of service or something. When we worked at Foxtel in the call centre, at one point famously one of the managers ran around and took everyone off this. You could pause so that you wouldn't get another phone call to do a quick job.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was called, Paul will remember, it's like GOS or something. You press this button and then you could do a little bit of admin and then you go back into the call. Yeah. At one point they published our phone number and there was 90 in queue, you know, endlessly. And this woman went around trying to get the I think it was something, a grade of service, and it was this
down.
idea of
or up or down.
Down, because you know, like make it better, get through the calls. And she just would go around and just bang everyone back on the call, even if you hadn't finished the job. Maybe that's what needs to happen to the SLA.
Well, I've got an idea, and mine is it all comes back to their name. I want every time they're about to commit some kind of crime, I want them to have to explain the thinking behind SLA, symbionese. What do you mean? Symbionese. Well, it means, yes, and I want them, it's going to take them so long, and people are going to go, what? Where is it? Who? No. It's not a place. No, but where's
Is it like Siberia?
So it just draws
Siberian
everything just so slow that then the crime doesn't get committed because there's
forget it.
They're so frustrated in trying to this stupid bloody name.
I agree. I think
and then
that's
people
a great
just going,
sentence.
What? Yeah, so that's my sentence. It's like,
and I think that fits nicely with that picture I've had in my head the whole episode of Undercover Brother.
Yeah.
You know, just someone coming in. We're the Symbionese Liberation Army.
The what?
Sorry, the what? Where?
The what? From where?
Is that somewhere in Asia? You know, where is that exactly? Is it changed?
I swear to God, there's a place in Wollongong called Symbio.
Thailand now? you know, I get your points. Perfect.
There you go.
All right, good one. All right, Swanny, well, thank you for that.
My pleasure.
I didn't know any of the detail of that. I was interested in very quickly the fact that there's often reference to Stockholm Syndrome, but
yeah,
she's just someone who may or may not have suffered from it, as opposed to it being.
Well, interestingly, it came about, I think the year after or something, because then
73. There was a robbery in 73.
Oh, was it?
Where that happened. Well, you were talking to the bodyguard.
Yes, look.
Having a little look-see.
Yes.
Because that, for me, she is synonymous with this idea of Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah.
That's about all I knew about her, was that she kind of joined up with her captors. That's all I knew.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think the poor fella, I think the poor love probably was programmed, and good on her for getting on with her life, and good on her for not actually killing anyone. And Bill Clinton may have been let's face it, problematic person in some regards, but he pardoned her, and that's a good job. And well done, John Wayne, also a problematic person.
Good point, I thought.
Good job. And no, I couldn't refute that. Good job.
No, fair enough.
So on that note, as we say every week, miss you already. Cha-cha-cha-cha. Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.